All right. Thanks for the introduction. But for those of you who don't know me, like I said, I did go to Thurgood Marshall School of Law. I did that intentionally because I believe in building coalitions and working together. And in fact, if you're in Dallas on December 9th, me and Senator Royce West have a joint African American Latino Christmas party. And we've been doing that now for 9 years. LULAC, for those of you who don't know about LULAC, LULAC is the oldest Latino civil rights organization in the country, founded in 1929. Those of you who are not from the Southwest will not realize that just like there were segregated schools in the Deep South, in Texas there were Mexican-only schools, white-only schools, white cemeteries, Mexican cemeteries, and so on. So LULAC was founded as a way to fight against that discrimination and fight for civil rights for Latinos. And we've been doing that, and next year we will be 90 years old. We were founded in 1929 in Corpus Christi, and we will be 90 years old next year. We're the largest Latino organization in the country with about 140,000 members. When I got elected in July 21st, we were in 38 states. Now we're in 41 states, adding Nebraska, Alaska, and Louisiana to councils. So, and we're membership based. That means everybody pays to be a volunteer for LULAC. So it's also a little different. So let me go ahead and give you a little bit about what we're doing here. The first thing we had to do was to block the vote. Voter suppression, it's not, it's the new Jim Crow. Randy Paras, who's from Arizona, over there told me, we now have the criminalization of civic engagement. Think about that. In Texas, it's a crime to register people to vote if you don't first go and take a class and register with the county. It's a felony to register people to vote. To vote by mail, Randy was so successful in the back in recalling a Republican state senator who passed all the anti-immigration laws in Arizona. They had all their seniors vote by mail. Everybody vote by mail. Now it's against the law to vote by mail in Arizona. So this is the type of things we're dealing with. So just to give you an example, we saw voter suppression against the Hispanic community in Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, North Dakota, and Texas. All of these states were in play to a certain extent. In Arizona, we saw that not only were Latinos, but Native Americans on the Navajo reservation were about 98,000 Latino voters. They were not allowed to get ballots or to vote. In Florida, the Miami-Dade had the third highest number of rejected black voter ballots and the seventh highest number of rejected Hispanic ballots. This is where you're having the race with Gillum and Senator Nelson. Okay, Voting Rights Act. We had to sue 32 Florida counties for not printing ballots in Spanish in Florida. Okay, we won those litigation. In Georgia, Latino registered voters were thrown out, registrations. You heard about the 70,000? They were all black and Latino, okay? Because Latinos are now a big chunk in Atlanta and other cities around Atlanta. In Dodge City, you ever heard get out of Dodge? Literally, Dodge City, Kansas is now 60% Latino, okay? And there was a big race for governor between the President Trump's head of the voter fraud, remember the never, Koch. And so, Kobach, yeah. And so in Kansas, they took the only polling place and put it 20 miles outside the city. Think about that. And so LULAC filed a lawsuit against Kansas. We lost the lawsuit. So then we sent 2 vans and we paid Uber drivers to take Latinos to the polls. And by the way, Kobach lost and Kansas elected a Democrat. And to give you an example, Dodge City has 27,000 people. The next town is about 3,000 people, majority Anglo. They had 3 polling locations. Okay, that's the kind of stuff we were running up against. In the North Dakota, we went over about what happened with the Native Americans. In Texas, Beto O'Rourke was in a tight race with Ted Cruz. The day that early voting started, the immigration, ICE, was going to conduct a crowd control exercise in front of the Latino polling place. ICE agents showed up in full military gear for crowd control. And it was only after we put calls in that they canceled the crowd control exercises after they had already showed up. Okay? In Texas State University, they closed the only voting location at the university. And then in Houston, where you have record turnout, the first day there were people standing outside. You know how you talk about Black Friday? In Houston, at the early polling locations, there were 1,000 people waiting to vote at 7 a.m. in the morning. And so what the Republican county judge, elections official in Houston did, they closed the polls at 4 o'clock. The polls are supposed to be open from 7 to 7. And they closed them at 4 o'clock arbitrarily, and we had to file suit to keep them open till 7. So this was happening across the board. But the good news is, Latino turnout in Texas was over 300% for the midterm in 2014. And we're just going to give you a quick story.
A really big thing of the night, voters getting out of the house and going to vote, and they're doing it in record fashion tonight. ABC 15's Nicole Valdez joining us from ASU, the epicenter for voter turnout tonight.
This is Arizona.
Well, we introduced you to him earlier, but the last student in line today just finished casting his vote at 9:15 tonight. That is 2 hours after polls were set to close today. So the word overwhelming, pretty much an understatement as to the amount of voters that showed up here at Arizona State University tonight. It took poll workers bringing in more staffers, more printers, and setting up stations to vote outside of the precinct, something they say they usually try to avoid. Definitely an interesting situation for voting here tonight, and that was what they had to do to make sure they tried to get everybody who lined up here before 7 o'clock tonight inside to get their votes cast. However, even with that long wait for many students who showed up here tonight, they say they were happy and willing to wait as long as they could cast their ballots in one of the most important elections they've seen.
I do think that it is really inspiring though, because we're on a college campus, to see so many young people like willing to vote and say their voice, because politics can be like so taboo with our generation, so it's good to see everyone out here.
Of course, the big question here tonight, how will these late ballots get counted into the final results? I've been talking to poll workers here, and they tell me these ballots still need to be physically driven to the county recorder's office to then get tabulated, and that alone could take several hours. So they're not certain that these votes will be counted by tonight. It could take through the night, even through tomorrow morning, to finish counting and recording all of these votes here tonight. Now, whether or not that will have an impact on the final results is obviously still not certain as to whether or not these votes will really make a difference as to who wins some of these contingent and very close races. Of course, we'll keep an eye on those numbers for you all through the night and into the morning. For now, we're in Nicole Valdez, ABC 15, Arizona.
And of course, the final votes were taken, and we have a new Democratic senator from Arizona. Click it up. Okay. All right. So this is the numbers we have. In 2018, we had Latinos voted for the first time. Okay, very first time, and that increased to 27% from the before. More Latinos voted for Democrats than Republicans, but we do have some cousins in Florida who happen to be Cuban American. Not all the Cubanos. They tend to be a little bit more conservative than the Puerto Ricans or the Mexican Americans. So about 69% vote Democrat, about 29% vote Republican, and you can cousins, right? And so, and then as you notice, the African Americans were 90% Democrats, 77% Asians, and wishing them that as being part of the effort. Hispanic women vote more higher than Hispanic men. And that's an issue that we're talking about internally. We still have a lot of Hispanic men that are voting Republican, and I think that's maybe a little bit of macho bias that occurs when you have a lot of women candidates on the Democratic side. Just the way it is. Okay. And then you see the numbers for white women and black men and black women, which he already explained. In Texas, in the exit polls that were done, 64% of people voted for Beto O'Rourke, 35% voted for Ted Cruz, and then the numbers go down, as you can see, in Nevada and Arizona. But basically, Latinos are basically favor Democrats 2-1. Numbers from Florida is sort of the purple state that's still being decided, show that more than 2 million Hispanics registered to vote this year. That's a 24% increase for the Democratic Party, while 15% belong to the Republican Party. And what we're seeing is Puerto Ricans and Latinos from other places are voting Democrat, and young Puerto Ricans under the age of 35 are also voting Democrat. But that's still up in flux. Andrew Gillum did get the majority of Latino vote with 56%, but it wasn't enough because about 42% of Hispanics did vote for the Republican. Again, our Cuban brothers and sisters over there. Okay. And Rick spent more money on Spanish language ads than any other Republican in the country, just to show you. Okay. The early numbers, and we're still waiting. I was hoping to have some numbers for you, but just to give you an example, El Paso County, where Beto O'Rourke was from, showed an 80% Hispanic increase in turnout, and 168% increase compared to 2014. Okay. In Hidalgo County, which is 92% Hispanic, the number of votes cast for Senate candidates more than doubled for 2014, and part of this has been our outreach by Latino organizations as well as some other ones. The makeup of the Congress will be different. A lot more Spanish will be spoken here in the capital. 42 Latinos are expected to serve, the largest number ever in Congress. Okay. And we have one race that's still too close to call. Gina Ortiz is in a tight race with Hurd in Texas, and we're still waiting to see what the numbers are. I think 69 votes separate them right now. Okay. And then we have some stats here regarding about 64% of Latinos voted for the Democratic congressional candidates as opposed to the Republicans. Some of the stuff we talked to you about earlier. But Latinos overall are trending more Democrat, and they're turning out in higher numbers, and we're seeing Latino millennials vote for the first time in significant numbers, something we had not seen before. Those Latino millennials between the ages of 18 and 29, if you were in Texas, you probably got 10 to 12 texts, to vote for Beto, usually. And that was something that's a millennial idea that came up, so everybody's texting people now to go vote. Okay? Where we don't know yet, but we've seen numbers in the House seats. These are the we call them Assembly here in Virginia or wherever. In Texas, we call them the State House of Representatives, but the state houses. In Dallas County, where I'm from, Dallas, we elected 3 Latinas for the first time, and they all replaced Republicans. Okay, so and we saw that across the board, and we picked up 10 seats in the Texas House. The Republicans still controlled, but what we also saw was the more restless and redneck candidates lost. So, for example, Representative Matt Rinaldi, when they were having a debate last year in the Texas House regarding, it's called SB 4, which was the Sanctuary Cities bill, he called ICE on the Dreamers that were in the gallery. Okay? Think about that. I just call ICE, they're going to go pick y'all up. And then he was confronted by 2 Latino state House representatives, and they almost got into a fist fight. Anyway, he was defeated by a white, female, gay, lesbian candidate. You can't make this up, or Latinos being the majority of the vote. We showed that the numbers are going up. Harris County, Houston, Texas, elected the first Latina county judge, and she's 27 years old and an immigrant from Colombia. So what we're seeing is that we also had 9 Latinos elected in Colorado, and we're seeing even here in Virginia, I think they elected the first 2 Latinas delegates. So we're seeing across the board races and there's 2 races still outstanding in Colorado, and both are Latino candidates and both are leading, and we're still waiting for the final numbers. Okay, so again, these are the numbers we talked about in terms of Latinos making up 11% of the electorate. 76% of registered Latinos voted in most of the states, but there's still a lot to do out of 60 million who are registered. We are going to send, Texas is going to send 2 Latinas to Congress. Veronica Escobar from El Paso and Sylvia Garcia from Houston. They're the first Latinas ever elected in Texas. So that's just to show you how the demographics are changing, and as well as the women. So that's kind of where we're at. I didn't put together our legislative package because that's still a work in progress. But let me just tell you real quick, we're working on trying to get an immigration reform bill done. I was the co-author of the in-state tuition bill, the Texas Dream Act, back in 2001, just to show you how dynamics have changed. In 2001, I had 3 Republican and 3 Democratic sponsors of that bill. It passed the Texas House 147-3. It passed the Texas Senate 27-4. And Governor Rick Perry, who's the Secretary of Energy, signed it. Okay? Flash forward, you can't get Republicans to pass any immigration bill or sign off on that because of Trump. So we want to make sure that we get some type of immigration bill that protects the Dreamers, about 1.8 million. There might be a compromise on that. I'm speaking nonpartisanly in terms of some funding for border security, but making sure that those Dreamers get passed. That's a top priority. Second, healthcare. 9 governorships changed. In Texas, for example, and in a lot of states that have Republican governors, they still don't have Obamacare. Okay, so we're gonna work in those states where Democrats got elected to expand the number of people that are covered by health insurance, because that's still a major issue. Third, funding for education. In almost every school district throughout the South and the Southwest, Latino students, for example, I'm going to use Texas again. Unfortunately, we're always at the bottom on most issues. Latinos are now 68% of first graders in Texas. Okay, now think about that. And the last legislative session was the first time they cut funding for education in Texas. Okay, so and then they started putting money in charter schools instead. So what we're seeing is you're still seeing now. Now I told you about the criminalization of civic engagement. You're also looking at the defunding of public education as the student bodies look more brown and more black, frankly. Okay, and so we're having to deal with that issue on a national basis. And then last, we need to make sure that all these judges are still going to be appointed. Okay, and they're not a very. Last I checked, 98% of all the federal judges appointed by Trump have been white males. Okay, so we got to be able to figure out how to diversify, because those judges are going to be there for a long time. Okay, and the whole Kavanaugh fight was just one, because I'm afraid if DACA gets to the DACA legislation, when it gets to the Supreme Court, I'm pretty sure they're going to declare it unconstitutional, and you'll have 1.8 million young men and women who will be subject to deportation and losing their careers, even though this is the only country they've ever known. So that's kind of where we're working on and going forward, and we're working with our national board to come up with some plans to work together and build allies and friendships across the board, because we're stronger when we're together. And when you think about all these Jim Crow issues I talked about at the beginning, I almost think like Paul Revere would, when he was in Boston, he said the British are coming, the British are coming. If you hear Trump, it was the brown people are coming, the brown people are coming. They're in a caravan and they're coming. Let's send troops to the border because they're coming. And it was a scare tactic to get out his face. So we clearly understand that. The good news is we're defeating them one by one, and even Congressman King, who's one of the most right-wing, he calls himself a Nazi actually, he only won by 3 points in Iowa, okay, which is majority white. So we are putting up the resistance, we are fighting those battles, and we look forward to working with the Urban League in the future.